In the 7th grade, I performed the appropriate actions to transition from boyhood to man. I accomplished a feat of masculinity. I owned enough Star Wars shirts to wear one every day of the week and then some. Every morning, I would unfold one of those 100% cotton youth large bad boys and become a hero, an Anakin, a Mace Windu. Heck, I'd be stoked to be an Ewok. With these shirts on, I was invincible, unstoppable, a Jedi master. My Jansport backpack was my R2-D2, and the gap in my teeth was my Padawan braid. Except one day as I walked down the halls of Pioneer Middle School sporting clone troopers on my chest, Fletcher Smith looked at me and said, "Nice Star Wars shirt, faggot." Now, it was the last time I wore a Star Wars shirt except once my junior year of high school, and I worked to the Harry Potter Half-Blood Prince trying to be what I thought was ironic. What makes me nervous is that one comment changed my life. What fuels my nightmares is that diversity is dead. As soon as they realize the Force is strong with this one, they call in Order 66 and make sure we are under their power. And I'm over here thinking, it's a trap. You want us to be different, but you hate us to become a Jar Jar Binks. I don't need to remind you that Luke had to stop looking into the box to save the day. That box is a place I won't stay. I'm proud I live my life the opposite way. It's no longer cool to read. It's no longer cool to like school. It's no longer cool to be a good guy. It's no longer cool to be a Jedi, because life is a pod race, and everyone is betting against you because Sebulba always wins, but I'm Han Solo, so never tell me the odds. And 29% of students who are bullied will drop out of high school. But there has to be something said about the Jedi, that they fought with the rebels, the resistance, against the people who are supposed to protect us, the people in charge. We're different, so we have to come together and teach each other, because being bullied became the Yoda on my back, training me to lift my starship up and down in the swamps of public school. And you can say I don't get any action, that's because I'm saving myself. I'm saving myself for Queen Amidala, and there's going to be a lot of General Grievouses swinging around 4 lightsabers. I don't need to remind you that Yoda had the smallest lightsaber, and he was still the master. Don't forget Jango Fett, because cloning yourself won't make you a good father and won't make your kids grow up any faster. What fuels my nightmares is that everything I need to know I learned from watching Star Wars, but I'm scared no one else is watching. People remember Darth Maul and forget Qui-Gon Jinn. People know about Charles Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer, and James Holmes, but kids today don't know what Malcolm X did. What fuels my nightmares is that my lightsaber can block blaster fire and laser beams, but it can't block ignorance, and if you don't look good in a metal bikini, then you're not wanted. But the point is, Leia wore that because she was a slave, and we're enslaving ourselves every time we try to fit in a metal bikini, every time we try to fit in. What fuels my nightmares is that one day I'll wake up with a message saying, "Obi-Wan, you're our only hope," and I won't be able to because I forgot how to use the Force. But then I realized I know how to use the Force. I am the Force. I was raised a Jedi with skinny jeans and band tees, and someday I'll go back to the halls of my old middle school, except now exactly who I want to be. My idea is sky high like an X-Wing. I won't be destroying the Death Star. I'll be destroying expectations, destroying the Empire, and destroying my nightmare fuel. Thank you. Yeah, so that was the first complete spoken word poem I ever wrote. It was also the first spoken word poem I ever competed with, and it was the first spoken word poem I ever won a poetry slam with. And I was super surprised that all those things happened, because I didn't realize people wanted to hear poems about Star Wars. I like Star Wars a lot, and so I don't know. But people, I don't know, they like Star Wars. I'm super excited. I'm wearing Star Wars socks right now. I would show you, but that would be strange. But I didn't start out writing poetry. I didn't grow up writing. I kind of struggled academically a little bit, and so I never thought writing or even any creative arts like that were something that I could pursue or end up in. I started out, I did grow up listening to music, though, and lyrics kind of influenced me to get into poetry. And how I started getting into poetry is because I love live music, and I love going to concerts. And I decided to go to a music festival, and it's called Bumbershoot, and it's in Seattle, Washington, and everyone should go, and everyone should go to music festivals. But if some of you are frequent concert goers, or maybe you've been once, or maybe you have yet to experience it, there's an interesting feeling of like camaraderie when you're at a concert or a show, watching a performance of someone that you and the whole audience appreciates and admires and loves their art. You just kind of feel like at home together, and it's super powerful and empowering. So I've just, good idea. You should all go to concerts. Tell your parents. You're like, I need concert money. TED Talks told me. But what you should do, go to concerts. But I went to a concert, and there was kind of some dead space in between when one of the performers were playing, and there was like an ad for a poetry slam going on at one of the indoor venues. In all honesty, I just kind of wanted a place like sit down out of the sun. Of course, in Idaho, you probably want to get out of the cold. It is so cold here, and y'all just drive on the snow. It's wow, I'm impressed. I was going like 15, so I'm sorry if any of you got stuck behind me, because you just drive the speed limit even though it's snowing. So there was some dead space, and so we went to a poetry slam, and it was called Battle of the Word, the Best of the West. And I thought that sounded like a monster truck rally, so I was super excited because I had heard of poetry slams, but I didn't really know what they were about. But when I went, there was a few things that had a significant impact on me as an artist, but also just as a person, how I wanted to live my life. The first thing was how I decided I would communicate with people and how I would respect people who communicated with me. And the second thing was what I defined as an artist and what I defined as art. And there's something you'll learn if you ever have the opportunity to go to a poetry slam, is each poet has 3 minutes to say their poem before they start losing points. Poetry slam is the competitive form of spoken word poetry. And so you have 3 minutes, and it's really empowering to have people listen to you straight for 3 minutes, and you know they're not going to interrupt you, and you know they're not listening to give you a response, to contribute to the conversation. I'm not saying that conversations are bad in a sense, but it's an interesting feeling to know that just a group of people are just listening to you without making any comments, and they're just there to listen to you, what you have to hear. And so I decided to take that from poetry and apply it to my everyday life and communication and relationships with people. Just listening to them, because there's a lot of things that we can learn and hear from people that aren't necessarily in their words, and that's a huge part of spoken word poetry, is portraying emotions and feelings in stories without just some words that you're using. Because on the other aspect of poetry slams, as an artist, you only have 3 minutes to say everything you want to say. So for me, I wanted to cram as many Star Wars references I could in 3 minutes. And there's a lot of movies, and they kept coming out with movies while I'm writing my poem, so I kept having to add. But you got to trim stuff out to fit it for 3 minutes. And it makes you appreciate every word that you're putting in there, because you realize each one is taking up some time. And so it made me think of the communications I have with people, and how I need to really pay attention to each word I'm using, because we don't know when these are going to be the last 3 minutes we have with this person. And I'm not saying that like someone's going to pass away or be morbid, but we don't know the significant impacts we can make on people with our communication with them, and just using that 3 minutes. Because that's the thing about poetry is we talk about the hard things, and we really open ourselves up. And I talked about feeling at home together when you're in an audience, watching a musician. And you can feel that as well in spoken word poetry. Something that's different is, instead of everyone looking up at this artist and appreciating them, everyone kind of looks at each other and appreciates one another for their art. And so you're kind of inviting people into your own home personally, and telling your story so they can feel comfortable to raise their voice as well. That's something that's super important right now. It's a really critical time for art. I know my talk is called, or my speech is called, It's Always Time for Poetry, and I'm a firm believer in that, because now is the perfect time for art. There's a lot of conflicts, not just physically, but mentally and verbally. There's a lot of tension. We see it in our personal exchanges, and especially in social media. And us as a group, we were raised on social media, and so we understand how that communication is important and how it can give us a platform to reach a lot of people. And so I really wanted to focus, as I was becoming more of an artist, how I was using my platform, and what was I saying to people, and was I making a positive impact, and was I really paying attention to each word that I was saying? Was I opening myself up, and was I giving people the opportunity to open themselves up? Because like life isn't gonna wait for us, and it sounds like a cliche, but some of you, I'm sure, are seniors in high school, and it's you're going to graduate soon, so you have to finish everything for that, and you have to apply to colleges, and there's maybe relationships in your life or lack of relationships. There's things like, I don't know when prom is or like homecoming, but you got to do that stuff and like buy tuxedos and things, and it gets stressful, and life isn't going to wait for other hard things to happen in your life. It's not going to be like, okay, when you're done with prom, then I'll have problems at home, or when you finally like pick a college, then I can throw financial struggles. Life doesn't do that. Like I found out, surprise. It's just going to come at you, and poetry shouldn't have to wait either. If life's not waiting for you to be ready, poetry shouldn't have to wait for you to be ready. Because we're all poets. That was something I learned, like I said before, what defined a poet and what defined art. And whenever I heard the arts before, I would think of theater or like sculpture or drawing or dance. But poetry is just something that you put your passion into and that you care about. One thing that's great about spoken word is there's no rules. There's no like couplets, or you need to follow certain grammatical patterns or rhyming schemes. You can just do whatever you want in 3 minutes. And so we're all poets. Like, I get so frustrated when I talk to people and they tell me, like, they used to write poetry, or, oh, I write poetry. I'm not like a poet. I don't, no one really reads them, or they're not that good. And we kind of shortchange ourselves, because if we, like, learn how to play piano, we consider ourselves a musician. Or if we run regularly, we tell people we're a runner. It doesn't matter if you're in the Olympics or not. If you run, you're a runner. And if you write poems, you're a poet. And that's what I started to see, that we could define ourselves as artists by just being authentic. And we talk pretty often about being authentic and seeing things from other people's perspective. And I really don't like this cliche of walking a mile in their shoes. One thing I don't like cliches is just because I'm a poet and we don't like cliches because we're not supposed to use them. There's some truth behind them. But walking a mile in their shoes, why I don't like that is because, like, that's not how we see people's perspective. If we're trying to see a point of view from someone else's point of view, like, we put their lens on us, we still have our lens. We're only trying to guess how they think to see how they think, and it doesn't come out clear. It gets muddy. And so same when we try to walk a mile in their shoes. Like, when I was younger and I would hear that, I would get frustrated because I was just like, well, then they're like, they have my shoes. Now I'm like out of luck. The best way to understand someone is to walk a mile with them and just listen to them. And that's something that poetry has taught me, is the impact of listening as an artist. Can not only make us a better artist, but can just make us a better person. And we're able to talk about those hard things that people get nervous to talk about. And so that's a huge, important part of poetry, and why I think we always need poetry, and we always need to be writing. People always need to hear your voices and your stories. And like I said earlier, I didn't think a lot of people would want to hear a poem about Star Wars, but that poem kind of became a signature poem for me, and I was able to perform it in front of lots of different people in lots of different situations. And so many people would be able to relate to me, and they would come up to me and be like, oh, I remember someone made fun of my shoes, or someone made fun of me for riding the bus, or someone didn't like a pair of pants or a haircut I had. So many of these things that in hindsight we realize are not a big deal, but we remember someone saying those things to us. And that made me feel better, because I realized it wasn't like dumb or silly that I remembered that experience when I was in 7th grade, because we've all had them. Whether or not we can exactly relate to one another, we can understand, and we can understand the feelings that we have. We can't understand, like, exactly how someone feels, but we've all been sad, and we've all probably felt betrayed, and we've been frustrated, and we felt lonely. And so when we kind of raise our voices together as poets and as people, and I mean by sharing our stories, it becomes easier to talk about those things, and we realize those things, like, can be talked about. It's not just something small. It's not something we have to brush under the rug. It's okay to talk about them. And so I'm sure some of you are like, well, how can I get involved in poetry? Or, because it usually takes like a really big city to have a competitive slam poetry team, where they have poetry slams often, like every weekend. And I grew up in a small town in eastern Washington where there wasn't a poetry community around there. What I realized, like I said, it's always time for poetry. Everyone can be poets. You just need to tell your story and be authentic. You can do that anywhere. So especially here in Idaho Falls and this surrounding area, you don't have to travel to Boise or Salt Lake to have a poetry slam. You just need people to get together. You don't even need pen and paper. Like, people write poems in their phone. You don't even have to write things down with spoken word. I was explaining earlier to some people before we started is that why I loved spoken word is because no one can read my poems. And so when I mess up, you have no idea. And so when you're in poetry slams or reading poems with your friends, if you never write it down or never give them a copy, you can say whatever you want and no one will know if it's wrong or right, which is awesome. Not that I messed up, just saying. Maybe a little bit. But, and you can even change it as you go, which is empowering. We can change our message and kind of share these voices together and invite one another in. And as you start to use your voices together, you'll see and realize that more people want to join because they just want to be listened to, and they want to be able to put their voice together too. And it makes a really positive impact with other artists, and because now is like a perfect time for art, and there's so much great art being made now, and we can only just contribute to it. And so before I'm done, I'm gonna do one more poem. I just want to thank everyone for letting me have the opportunity to come here and talk. Idaho's a really nice place. In Oregon, we don't have to pump our own gas, which I would suggest all of you because it's so cold here. You should bring that up. That way you don't have to get out of your car. That's my only thing that I would change about Idaho. The rest is awesome. Yeah, but thank you for letting me come here and opening your home and your community to me. And so I want to do a poem that would be the best opportunity for me to open myself to all of you. And so this is my final poem, and then I'll be done. But thank you so much. It's been an awesome opportunity. This poem is called Just Stuff. White boy, white male, cis straight, thin blonde Christian, 2-car family, parents hugged me enough to where I felt wanted, but they weren't overbearing, parents co-signed my loan. I have enough money to buy pizza. I often have enough money to pay for gas to drive to Idaho just to read poetry. I have 1,330 Facebook friends. I have a Netflix and Hulu Plus account. I have no reason to hate myself. I more often than not hate myself. People who look like me, I guess, are on top. I guess they run the world. I guess people I think look like me because sometimes I don't want to get out of bed because I'm scared I'll walk by a mirror and see myself. They say it's a state of mind, but it's a state I don't want to be in, like Montana or Missouri. I'm hurting, but I can't just rub some dirt in it. I can't just walk it off because if I walk it off, I'm scared I'll walk into an intersection or off a bridge. In elementary school, they asked us what we wanted to be when we grew up, and I said coal miner. So my parents bought me a hard hat so I could look the part, but I never became one. I wish I would have answered happy because I looked the part, but what if I never become happy? I'm bad at being happy. I'm bad at being me. I'm bad at being mean. For some reason, the bullies who didn't like me looked like me, and they confused me. Picked on me for being small, but they picked on the fat kid. Made fun of me for being too pale, but they hated the black kid. Hated my church, but they spit hate speech compositions fueled by their own religious convictions. Their insults were hollow. Shallow, because I was already full of self-loathing, felt like I was wearing depression when my family could afford name brand clothing. I didn't understand why sometimes I wanted to die. I don't understand why sometimes I want to die. Because when you're depressed, it's not like you're sad, like when you realize you just binge watched every episode of My Strange Addiction or Hoarders. It's when nothing feels right. Writing poems feels unnatural. Your home feels inhabitable. People ask you what's wrong. And you say, I'm depressed. And they say, how are your eating habits? How are your sleeping habits? How are your exercise habits? And you say, I've been trying to get more sleep. In fact, I get disappointed every time I wake up. I've been doing push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups, but I can't seem to pick myself up, and they get uncomfortable. So when people ask you, what's wrong? You say, I'm fine, just tired. But you want to say me. I asked my counselor if he thought I was crazy, and he said that word's up to interpretation. And I laughed, and he laughed, and he didn't answer, and I hate that. 150 milligrams, 300 milligrams, 450 milligrams. When I put chemicals in my body to change my feelings, you called it an addiction. When you put chemicals in my body to change my feelings, you called it a prescription. But I decided it's okay. It's okay to take my prescription. It's okay to see a counselor. It's okay if chicken nuggets make me feel better for 3 days straight to wear the same sweater or to rewatch Hoarders. Because I'm just a co-signed white male, thin blonde white male, a white male, depressed, poetry writing, pizza affording, 450 milligrams a day, sometimes just cries for no reason white male. But there is a reason. The reason is I just wanted to cry, and I'm depressed sometimes, and maybe you're depressed sometimes, and that's fine, because it doesn't have to define us, because there's one thing I learned from binge watching Hoarders is everything else is just stuff. Thank you.